Welcome to CBR. The Hulk's portrayal in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has often been seen as inconsistent and underwhelming. Hulk is one of those characters who have often been sidelined, underutilized, or had his potential limited in various films. Today on CBR, we'll dive into how the MCU failed Hulk. In The Incredible Hulk, 2008, the MCU took a swing at bringing the green behemoth to the big screen, but the execution ended up feeling a bit off. The movie's technically part of the MCU, but it doesn't really feel connected to the larger universe that was starting to come together with films like Iron Man 2008. The Hulk's portrayal, with Edward Norton as Bruce Banner, just doesn't hit the same notes that later MCU movies would, especially once Mark Ruffalo took over the role. The character feels less developed, and the film misses out on exploring the internal conflict that's central to the Hulk's persona in a deeper, more meaningful way. The biggest problem in The Incredible Hulk is the portrayal of Bruce Banner. Norton is a solid actor, but his take on Banner doesn't dive into the psychological complexity that would later define the character. In the comics, the Hulk is often portrayed as a tragic hero, someone battling his own anger, his self-doubt, and the fear of losing control. This is barely touched on in the film, though. Instead, we get a more generic action movie where Banner is just trying to cure himself, with a few moments of emotional conflict thrown in for good measure. But those moments aren't enough to really sell the audience on the depth of Banner's struggle. It's almost like the filmmakers missed the point of what makes the Hulk such an interesting character in the first place. Another big issue is the lack of connection to the wider MCU. At the time, Marvel was just starting to build its cinematic universe, and The Incredible Hulk feels almost like an afterthought in that larger plan. Aside from a brief cameo from Tony Stark and a couple of references to S.H.I.E.L.D., the film doesn't really tie into anything else that's happening in the MCU. There's no mention of the Avengers or any other superheroes, and the world feels smaller as a result. It's almost as if the filmmakers didn't know how important the larger MCU would become, so they just kept the Hulk movie separate. This lack of integration made the character feel out of place in the grand scheme of things, and we didn't see the Hulk again in a solo film for a long time. Finally, the Hulk himself just isn't explored in a meaningful way. He's mostly just a destructive force in this film, more of a monster to be chased down than a tragic hero. Sure, the action scenes are fun and show off the Hulk's raw power, but they don't really give us any insight into his struggle to control his rage. The Hulk is more than just a giant green wrecking ball. He's a complex character with real emotional depth, and the Incredible Hulk barely scratches the surface of that. In the Avengers 2012, the Hulk Mark Ruffalo is kind of wasted. While he's a key player in the team and definitely brings the action, his emotional and psychological depth is barely touched upon. Instead of delving into Bruce Banner's inner conflict, the real heart of the Hulk's character, the movie just uses him as a destructive force and, honestly, a bit of comic relief. While Hulk's rampage through New York is iconic and super fun to watch, it doesn't do much to explore who the Hulk really is or what Banner's dealing with inside. The thing about Hulk is that he's not just a big green rage monster, he's a guy struggling with an uncontrollable force inside of him. Banner constantly battles with the fear that if he loses control, things will get way out of hand. That internal struggle is the core of Hulk's character in the comics, and it adds layers to his persona. But in the Avengers, we barely see any of that. There's no real exploration of the toll it takes on Banner's mental state. Instead, we get a Hulk that's more interested in smashing and cracking jokes than wrestling with his emotions. When Hulk does go on a rampage in New York, it's thrilling, sure, but it feels more like a plot point than a moment of personal struggle. The movie doesn't dive into the emotional consequences of Hulk's destruction, nor does it show how Banner feels about being this ticking time bomb. We don't see his guilt or fear over what the Hulk might do, which could have been such an emotional moment for the character. Instead, Hulk's mostly used as a comic tool, with lines like "I'm always angry," becoming iconic, but also a little hollow. When you think about the complexity that could have been explored. Even worse, the film doesn't really dive into Banner's relationship with the rest of the team. We see a bit of awkwardness with Black Widow, but it's not enough. The emotional struggle of working alongside a team while constantly fearing the beast inside him is barely touched upon. The other Avengers have well-developed arcs and personalities, but Hulk is mostly there to smash things, and that's a huge missed opportunity. At the end of the day, the Avengers dropped the ball on representing Hulk. The movie could have gone deeper into his struggle with the rage inside him and how it affects his relationships and sense of self. Instead, Hulk is just a fun, smashing force, awesome, but not the complex character he's meant to be. In Avengers Age of Ultron 2015, the Hulk's character once again gets shortchanged. While the movie gives us an epic showdown between Hulk and Iron Man in the Hulkbuster suit, the emotional stakes of that fight get buried under all the action. Sure, we see Hulk struggle with his uncontrollable rage and his fear of turning into the monster, but the film doesn't take enough time to really explore the toll it takes on him. Instead, the focus is on spectacle and big explosions, leaving Hulk's deeper, more interesting side mostly ignored. The Hulkbuster battle is, of course, a total blast to watch. It's a huge moment for Hulk, showing how destructive and uncontrollable he can be, but the emotional weight of the fight doesn't quite land. We know that Hulk is angry and out of control, but we don't really get to see what that does to Banner on a psychological level. How does it feel for him to be the one causing all this destruction? Does he feel guilty, terrified? These are the deeper questions the movie could have explored, but instead it gets drowned out by the loud action scenes. We see Hulk smashing things, but we don't get a real sense of the emotional cost to Banner. Then there's the whole Bruce Banner and Natasha Black Widow romance. Honestly, this subplot feels pretty forced and out of place. The idea that Bruce and Natasha are suddenly into each other doesn't really come across as organic to the story. They have a few moments that hint at something more, but it doesn't feel earned. Banner's relationship with Natasha could have added depth to his character, especially in contrast to his struggle with the Hulk, but instead it feels like a way to give him something personal to do. It just doesn't land the way it should, and it distracts from the much-needed focus on Hulk's emotional journey. And then the way the movie ends with Hulk, it's honestly a bit of a letdown. Instead of seeing Hulk face his issues head on, the film decides to just have him run away, literally flying off into space to escape his problems. It feels like a cop-out, especially since this was a chance to see Hulk finally confront his fears and figure things out. Instead, the movie just sidelines him, taking the easy way out by removing him from the situation. That's a real missed opportunity for character growth. Thor Ragnarok 2017 is widely praised for its humor, vibrant color palette, and fresh tone, but when it comes to Hulk, the film kind of drops the ball. While the movie takes a fun, new approach by turning Hulk into a gladiator, it does a disservice to the character by reducing him to comic relief and ignoring his deeper emotional complexity. Instead of exploring Hulk's internal struggles, the film treats him more like a sidekick or a joke, which feels like a missed opportunity, especially given the rich emotional history of the character. In Ragnarok, Hulk is often portrayed as childlike, especially in his interactions with Thor. He seems like a big green toddler who's just along for the ride. While the humor works in some places, this version of Hulk feels more like a goofy sidekick than the tortured, complex character we've seen in other films. The internal conflict that defines Hulk in the comics, the constant battle between Bruce Banner and the Beast inside, is practically non-existent here. Instead of showing the deep psychological struggles Banner faces every time he transforms, we get a Hulk who mostly cracks jokes and smashes things. While the narrative does address the struggle between Hulk and Bruce, it's more on a comedic level. It's fun, sure, but it doesn't do justice to the rich emotional depth the character could have. One of the most frustrating aspects of Ragnarok is the missed potential of the smart Hulk version. In the comics, the idea of Hulk becoming more controlled and intelligent, sometimes even more heroic, is a huge part of his development. But in this film, we barely get a glimpse of that. Hulk's personality here seems more limited, reduced to the more primal, angry side of the character without much depth. It's a real shame because Ragnarok could have used that opportunity to dive into a more nuanced version of Hulk, exploring how he's evolved over time, especially after Age of Ultron, but instead we get a more one-dimensional Hulk, focused more on the comedy and action than his emotional and psychological growth. Another issue is that Hulk is mostly treated as a supporting character in Thor's story, rather than being given his own narrative arc. The film revolves around Thor's journey, and Hulk is often relegated to a sidekick role. Sure, Hulk gets a few cool moments, like fighting in the arena and helping Thor, but it feels more like he's there to serve Thor's storyline, not his own. This is a significant missed opportunity to explore Hulk's character in his own right, and it sidesteps any deeper exploration of his internal conflict or his relationship with Banner. Avengers Infinity War 2018 was an emotional roller coaster for Marvel fans, but one of the biggest letdowns for Hulk fans was his complete absence from the action. After all the build-up in the previous Avengers films, where Hulk was a huge, destructive force, the fact that he spends most of Infinity War sitting on the sidelines felt like a massive missed opportunity. Instead of the Hulk we know and love, we get a Banner who's trying desperately to get the Hulk to come out but can't. This could have been a fascinating exploration of Hulk's inner conflict, but instead, it was mostly played for laughs with little resolution. The way Hulk is handled in Infinity War feels like the writers took the easy way out. Banner's struggle to get Hulk to fight feels like it could have been a huge emotional beat, especially after all the trauma and growth the character went through in previous films. But instead of delving deep into why Hulk refuses to come out, why he's suddenly unwilling to fight when the world is at risk, the film just leaves it hanging. There's a tease of a psychological struggle between Banner and Hulk, but it never gets explored in any meaningful way. We never get to see why Hulk's so resistant. Is it fear, guilt, some sort of emotional or mental block? The movie doesn't really address it, and it feels like a huge missed opportunity to give us more depth for both Banner and Hulk. Instead, we get this running gag where Hulk just won't come out, and Banner is left in these awkward comedic situations. Don't get me wrong, some of the moments are funny, but after a while, it starts to feel like the movie is using Hulk's absence for cheap laughs rather than giving us a real exploration of the character. This whole dynamic feels unsatisfying, especially since Infinity War could have really gone deep into the emotional and psychological fallout of Hulk refusing to fight, especially after what we saw in Thor Ragnarok and Age of Ultron. What's worse is that this inner conflict between Banner and Hulk is just left unresolved. By the end of the film, we still don't know why Hulk won't come out, and that arc feels totally unfinished. Fans were hoping for a bigger payoff, maybe a moment where Hulk and Banner reconcile, or at least some insight into what's going on in Hulk's mind. But no, the movie just moves on, leaving Hulk's absence as a plot point with no satisfying explanation. In Avengers Endgame 2019, the MCU takes a big swing with Hulk by introducing the Smart Hulk, a version where Bruce Banner and Hulk merge to combine Banner's intellect with Hulk's strength. While it's an interesting idea, it feels like a missed opportunity to explore what this really means for the character. For years, the conflict between Bruce and Hulk has been the heart of the character, a constant internal struggle between his mind and his rage. But in Endgame, that tension is pretty much gone. We don't get to see the emotional fallout, or even how Banner feels about permanently merging with Hulk. Instead, Hulk is mostly played for laughs, like when he takes the group photo or carries the team around in battle. It's funny, but it undermines the depth of the character. Smart Hulk could have been an incredible opportunity to dive deep into what it means for Bruce to find a balance between the two sides of himself. The film could have explored the emotional weight of giving up the Hulk's raw power in favor of a more stable, intelligent version. But instead we get very little focus on the actual struggle or what this means for his identity. It's mostly glossed over, and Hulk ends up feeling more like comic relief than the emotionally complex character he's known for being. Bruce Banner's most significant recent appearance was in the She-Hulk television series, where he caught up with his cousin Jennifer Walters. However, on a bonding road trip, Jen suffered an injury during an accident, and some of Bruce's blood accidentally mixed with hers. In the aftermath, Bruce serves more as a mentor figure to She-Hulk, trying to help his cousin adapt to her new life. She-Hulk rightfully focuses mainly on Jen's conflicts between integrating her Hulk form with her daily life. However, Bruce does get some focus as well, even if his conflicts are more glossed over. Still, She-Hulk makes it clear that the audience has missed important parts of Bruce's development when his son Scar is introduced in the She-Hulk finale. The series glides over Bruce's sudden parenthood, making it clear just how much the MCU needs to fully check back in with the Hulk and actually examine his journey and the nuances to his character. The MCU keeps dropping the ball with Hulk, never fully exploring his emotional depth or the intense inner conflict between Banner and the Hulk. Whether it's skipping over his psychological growth or reducing him to comic relief, the films always fall short of tapping into his full potential as a character. With the MCU still growing and evolving, do you think we'll see a change in how the Hulk is portrayed soon? How do you think he should be portrayed in the future? Tell us in the comments, and remember to subscribe. Thanks for watching CBR.